Hey, Buru, Iboya, Ibu, Che, everybody in Cyberland. Hey, it's your favorite Babalao, at least I hope so. Umodum Odileke coming at you with another great video. All right, let me make sure I got a good line check here, making sure everybody's seeing me okay today. Good morning. Let me make sure I tell everybody good morning. Man, Bison. Hope everyone is doing okay. Let me let a couple of people flow in here first. And then we can definitely get after it a little bit. Okay. All right. Well, hey, let's just jump right in. Being that we're already 3 minutes into this, and obviously playing around with Zoom and YouTube is never necessarily the best of options, right? Being that I keep finding myself in this weird predicament trying to live stream from Zoom over, so I have to create another link, which is why when you guys hit the schedule button to see for one reason or another, it's just not going through. But we'll resolve that problem soon enough. I just got to keep playing with it. But hey, so I got you guys set up here. I see you guys great. I think you guys hear me. A couple of people logged in. Hey, so first things first, you know, Iburu boy abucheche, momo dumodileke. Coming at you, I like to go by, very bawala, at least I hope so. But here's the big thing, right? So far, we've been talking about quite a few things. The last few messages we put out every Sunday, right? So this time I want to kind of talk a little bit in this series of Sundays, right? Reflecting on the journey so far, right? In the previous, we'll call them sermons for all intents and purposes, we honor our already, right? Our personal divinity, our destiny. We discuss, right? Our ita. We were discussing the purpose of it. We were discussing ori, the inner head, right? Which is paramount. And we started to kind of move into this journey, right? And because as we begin to learn about Ori, we also begin to understand that if one's Ori is not, renovated, as if it's not honored, right, first, before anything else, right, we begin to kind of see where the conflict is going to begin to show, right? So whatever we recognize, right, as head in our life must be held up high. And that's the key, right? And we have to always remember that, right? Whatever is called the head is not placed on the ground, right? We don't sleep upside down. Our feet touch the ground. Our head stays up and elevated for a reason. Only when we rest do we lay our head down, right? And those are just kind of common kind of words, both figurative, all right, and literal, right? But in other words, we truly need to value our destiny, right? Our divine destiny, and we got to treat it with care, right? And we gotta revere it as much as possible. But why do we want to speak about the Orishas today? Because that's the Orishas terms, right? We talked a lot about Olodumare, Irumoles, Irumole Orons. We started to speak about our Ori and everything else, but now we got to talk about the Orishas. It's important for us to understand them from different perspectives, right? Not just the stuff that you're seeing on YouTube, not just the stuff that you see in books, but no. Let's understand the deeper meaning of the Orishas, right? The Orishas are a great cosmic force, right? That have energy that flows from another cosmic force. Well, the cosmic force in total is the Irumole Orum. And then when we get to the Orishas, we understand that that energy keeps flowing down, right? And that's how I kind of you have to kind of remember it. So then when we start to flow that even further, we understand that the Orishas are kind of like that shining light, the path for humanity's collective consciousness. They're the ones that are going to help us mediate, push us forward. Right? And we always got to remember that. In the Yoruba cosmology, it teaches us that 401 Irumoles, the divine powers, right, emanated to become the 401 Orishas. Now, energy behind nature and evolution, of course, that's who the Orishas are. And when we talk about energy behind nature and evolution, we are talking about that lightning. We're talking about that thunder. We're talking about that wind. We're talking about the cemeteries. We're talking about the waters and the rivers and the oceans and whatnot. Everything has a spirit. but particularly some of these spirits, right, are orishas. And those orishas have even more power to evolve things and push things forward, right? So there's a lot of different layers to the Yoruba cosmology, right? And that's something that we just have to remember. Hey, happy Sunday to you. Happy Sunday to you. Hey, Marie, what's that flag? You gotta let me know what that flag is. All right. So then it looks like a flag of Oloko and Chango. But more importantly, as we begin to see that the Orishas control the natural forces of things, fire, thunder, wind, right, ocean, they're guiding us, right, through spiritual evolution. So they are our divine teachers, our archetypes, right? And while Ori defines our destiny, the Orishas shape the conditions and the lessons through which the destiny unfolds. Right? So you guys are starting to see the relationships. If you go back, starting from the very first session onto now, right, you begin to kind of see now. You're seeing the pathway. Remember, Ori defines the destiny. The Orisha shape the condition and the lessons. Gotta write that down. Make sure you guys understand it. Through which destiny unfolds. So the Ita from our initiations. All right, let's say you have hand of Ifa. Let's say you got Ocha, right? And my intent is not to dig so deep into Ocha, but I do want to make a comment about Ocha because even me growing up as a Babalao, we were always told respect the Olorishas, respect the land of Ocha. So respect the land of the Orishas, the priest and priestesses there. You have to also be able to develop, you know, an ability to counsel the Olorishas, right? Because as a Babalao, you have a set level of skills, knowledge, and preparedness that will be effective to help the Olorishas. So Babalaos, you have to learn the Delegun, not so you can cast it. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is when someone comes to you with a libreta, let me give you guys a libreta, all right? So I show you, somebody walks up with a libreta and they say, hey, Parino, here's my libreta. Hey, can you read this for me? Can you give me some advice on my ita? I'm on Olorisha. I got crowned, a couple of years ago, and I like people to kind of give me a little bit of advice. Absolutely, boy. Because I could be their godfather, right? Or their godmother, or, I could be their godfather and hand to be five, and they may have a different godmother, right? In Ocha. So Babalaos, the ita, and what I'm trying to get to is the ita that the Olorishas need to care about from the Babalao is pata en cabeza. Okay, what was the casting that Elegua gave them, and what was the casting their guardian Orisha gave them? And I take that first letter from their Elegua and their first letter from their guardian Orisha, right? And at that very moment, I bring those two together to create what I need to learn and speak of. So I say this to say, what we need to understand is you need to care about your hand of Ifa, Ita. You need to care about your Ita in Delegum if you're crowned, right? And then, for those of you who have advice from spiritual misas and investigative misas, we need to honor the eguns appropriately, right? And it can be very well that the Itan Olorisha or the Itan Ifa is telling you to do things with the eguns as well. So all that is out there to kind of show you the way, show you the roadmap. And I think that's very important to remember. So I merely just kind of give you that because I think that is the big key. So that is the Ita from our initiations, right? We give them counsel under the umbrella of Ifa. In fact, the voice of Orumila and the Orisha advising us on how to fulfill our destiny is the whole key of this. Each and every one of you made a spiritual investment, right? Each and every one of you, this wasn't given to you for free. Right? So you have to use all the tools allocated around it, but it's important for us to understand the knowledge. And that's where we're going to dig into this. So today, we're going to focus entirely on the Orishas, their greatness, their divine functions, the sacred stories. We're gonna talk about how to connect to the human consciousness. We're gonna see, right, that each orisha, every cosmic assignment, every holds up kind of a mirror to our inner qualities, our struggles, right? Our good and bad, our pros and cons, right? We're gonna start to kind of see, the stories containing living wisdom in real world situations and issues, leadership, justice, creativity, and conflict, fertility, healing, right? And even questions of identity and purpose. By understanding the Orishas, we begin to understand ourselves a lot more. By honoring them, we activate those divine principles that are inside you, those things that are going to help push you forward. So let's explore, right? Let's explore some of the Orishas that we revere closely, especially within the Lokumi tradition, right? I want to talk about five of them, just five for today. I want to talk about Obatala. I want to talk about Chango. I want to talk about Ochun. I want to talk about Ogun. I want to talk about Yemaya. Right? And not that anybody else is not important. It's merely till we can get down to some foundational understanding, right? Because that's the key. So hey, little boy Bucheche, good to see you out here, Frazier. Whoop. And then Minnow, happy day. All right, so hey, let's start. Let's start. Let me get a sip of my coffee first. Okay, coffee in the system. We are ready to begin. Okay, so let's talk about Obatala first. We always gotta, we always gotta honor Obatala for quite a few reasons. He's a pure king of peace and creation. Obatala, a lot of times you hear the word Ochanla, Orishanla, right? The great Orisha. So if you break down the word Orishanla, right, we talk about the great Orisha. That's the translation, literally is that, right? The father, basically, of all the Orishas and humanity. And a lot of times when you start to dig into the history, right, of Obatala, we begin to see that, according to the tradition, the cosmology of things, Obatala is the leader of the Orishas, right, in the world, in this particular world. He's authorized by Olodumare to form the bodies of the human beings, right? So I want you guys to reflect on that for a little bit. This is why he's the leader. He was the first thing to mold our consciousness and mold, our bodies to a certain point when you start to dig into it. So then, if he's authorized to do that, he gives destiny a lot of times to creatures after they were molded, right? So we recall from our teachings, right, that before our spirit was born, right? So before you were zoomed in, right, into your mother's belly, into her womb, right? And maybe this is something that's a little bit, outside of script, but I want you guys to even think about that. Think about the womb of a woman, right? The water that surrounds it, the life that lives inside of it. All of that is still the creation of this very world, miniaturized down into the stomach of a womb. Shows the world, it shows the fluid, it shows the life, right? The Yoruba's deep. Just think about it. But we're gonna get back onto track. All right, so we gotta recall, right, that Yori, right, went and he knelt down before Ajala to receive the Ori, right? So your spirit went before Ajala to receive the Ori. What head is this child going to have when they come down there? Obatala then blesses the new being with a destiny and purpose, right? So we're starting to see stages here. So I want you guys to picture this like a movie. Here comes spirit, and spirit is flowing to Olodumare. Olodumare, I would like to be released to go down to Aye in order to do great things in your name. Beautiful. Olodumare says, go do great things. And like a great spirit, right, understands you always got to consult the elders. You always got to consult Ifa. Understand, how is that trip going to go? Good, bad, and different. Do I got to do an both? Do I got to prepare? And all those things take place. And then Obatala says, okay, everything is ready. Ayala gives the Ori, right, to the spirit. And now the spirit and the Ori have to come down. So Obatala then blesses the new being with the destiny and the purpose, because that's why Obatala is wrapped in there. That's why we talk about that Obatala is the owner of all heads, right? That's why we begin to kind of see that process take place. So as Obatala is the Orisha, basically a creation, we begin to kind of see the wisdom, the moral, the leadership, right? His essence is purity. Obatala is what we call an Orisha Funfun, an Orisha of white, right? And he's said to have molded, right, the human bodies, right, from sacred clay, the sacred clay that was delivered by death itself. So now you see that the companionship between light, dark, life, and death all come together, always in equilibrium. So then this is why, this is why the offerings to Obatalak do not contain salt, because symbolizing purity, and because it symbolizes purity, I'm sorry, and avoids a lot of the corruption. Right? He's a wise elder. He's patient. He's just. He's passionate. Right? And the guardian of all those, to include those who are disabled, those who are albino. Right? So there's a lot of things in here, right? And I want to just touch a little bit on why he defends the disabled. Because Obatala started to mold the human bodies in perfection, down to the very last detail. Obatala strayed from his path for a bit, and he consumed some palm wine. And when he consumed it, it, it obviously, just like anything else, you take a drink of something, right? It's going to begin to stew, right? It's going to skew your decision making. You're not going to be as sharp, right? You're polluting the very essence and illusion of what you're building. And he started to create the midgets and the disabled, and those things started to occur. This story was merely to depict that based on an error, right, that an Odisha did, we now find ourselves with the disabilities and albinos and etc. Which is why Obatala took exceptional, responsibility for them and became kind of like the guardian of them, no matter who their guardian is officially. So very important there. So I don't know about you guys, but it is cold out here. It is -4 degrees for those of you who are curious. All right, so let's dig into Obatala further. So Obatala's stories, begin to teach us leadership, responsibility, right? In one Odumavifa, particularly, we talk about a large group of animals and humans, right, that set out on a journey to a city called Omo Wumi, right? And they were warned. This is a Pataki, by the way. And they were warned that nonetheless, they were warned by a priest to make a sacrifice to avoid obstacles, right? But they delayed it. They neglected the advice. And along the way, right, they fell into a deep ditch, right? And they were trapped for 3 days, right? Now, I don't know about you, but if you're trapped for 3 days without food and water, things can get pretty dicey pretty quick. So one of the big things that was said here, uh, sorry, okay, trying to set up, make sure I can see my screen here. But they were trapped for 3 days, right, without food or water, exhausted. They cried out to Obatala. Obatala happened to be traveling and heard their cries, right? And this kindly elder peered into the ditch and he saw the people and they begged, Baba, please save us. Obatala, being a firm but fair teacher, asked, what will you give in return if he rescued them? Right? So then, desperate, they promised him offerings. Oh man, we will give you whatever, two of everything. Satisfied that they learned their lesson about humility and sacrifice, right? Obatala uses divine power, right, to lift them from the ditch, and he delivered them, from their fall into the ditch and whatnot. So Obatala in this story started to demonstrate mercy and might. Right. So then, basically teaching us that for every action, there's a reaction. For every long journey, it's important to consult. When you consult, do the aboses, so all things go great. And you begin to kind of see where there's this equilibrium of everything in life. So Batala, could have scolded. He could have even punished their foolishness. But instead, he rescued them. Once they showed the willingness to honor the divine, he turned a potential tragedy into a teaching moment on the importance of a both sacrifice and to respect elders. So, I like that Bataki because although it's very simple, it's very easy, there's not a lot going on. It just shows you the character of Obatala. It shows you that character of Obatala as the leader, the clarity, the Wapale, the good character. We start to kind of see that, full picture. This is the essence of Obatala's principles. Obviously, like I was telling you, he owns the head, right? Wearing white, cooling, calming your mind, all those things matter. And so when we talk about, he also governs the head spiritually, guiding our Ori towards his highest potential, we begin to kind of see why he helps shape the purpose of that destiny. Because obviously, if Obatala is the head and Ori is inside the head, he's not necessarily managing or dictating Ori. He is merely facilitating Ori on the outside, right? So guiding Ori towards its highest potential is the goal. So we're under Obatala's influence, we call to lead, right, with wisdom, right, and impartial love, and as a parent would, right, lead a family. For those of you who have children, right, leadership is not about power for its own sake. It's about sacred duty, right, to bring peace and order, right. So whoever puts on the crown is no longer a child, and that's something that I want to kind of make sure that we always remember. In Yoruba, we always talk about that authority comes with maturity. And in the Yoruba cosmology of things, we always got to remember that. So we must let go a lot of times of our childish ways. I mean, how many times in your life or today, even, you find yourself in this method of irresponsibility because it may be something I don't want to do. No one's really interested in what you want to do and don't want to do anymore. Is it the responsible thing to do? Are you destined to go do it? And you got to always remember that. So, Batala challenges us. How do we exercise the authority we've been given? Do we model the patience and integrity, or do we react to anger? Or do we get so worked up on everything that's going on in this world? Oh, Mari. You cried on Batala, mother. Maya? No, es Buru Boya. I love it. Or Batala's white cloth. Let's talk about it a little bit. So we always talk about the man of the white cloth, right? And I always heard that growing up in this faith, and I always wanted to understand what it was, right? And it's basically just symbolizing Obatala's peace in the world of turmoil. Think about it. This world has a lot of things going on. I was just watching the news the other day. You know what I mean? There's shootings all over the place, and there's crime. A lot of people don't like, and they want to get involved with politics, but what's the point of getting involved with politics? Does it help your inner circle? Does it do anything for you? Or do you just want to be angry and do something in the streets? That's to each their own. Right? But nonetheless, when we see the world like this, Obadallah teaches us that peace is achieved not through aggression, through patience, through negotiation, through righteousness. Right? A leader sometimes must be calm, and you got to be calm in some of the worst situations. You are the eye of the storm as a leader. Right? So when temper flares in your families, in your communities, we go to a batala, meaning that we're trying to invoke a cooler head. We're trying to invoke the peacemaker. We're trying to invoke the just judge to seek, right, to a retaliatory way of doing things to resolve in the best possible manner. That's who Obatala is. That's why we go to Obatala. Obatala's cool, white, you know, Sobera, or wherever you have him living, right? Um, those are all symbols of Obatala's might to push purity, peace, and humility to the world. The destiny Obatala gives us is ideally one of fulfillment and harmony, right? So before we move on from Obatala, right, he's said to be the king who owns all the leris, the heads. Yet even he had to bow to the Orisha of destiny. Even Obatala had to bow to Olodumari's will, always ensuring that God comes first. His humility and service are what make him great. So when we look at that, you know, he's an example of how we should be leading our homes, our workplace, our spiritual houses for the priests and priestesses that are watching. You know, as a parent, as an elder sibling, as a mentor, all those things plus more all add up to the same. How are you uplifting others? Or are you worried too much about selfishly gaining for yourself and not creating the future? We have to force multiply the people that are under our tutelage. We got to make sure that one day they surpass you. Hear me out. If there's one thing that I think sometimes we don't do well enough in the Lokumi side of the house, right? In the diasporic side of the house, all right? Or better yet, in general, because I have quite a few Bawalao friends that are Isheshe and Olorishas are Isheshe, and I would say that it's all pretty much the same. I fear that they worry about their status and their ego more than they do about I want to teach this person everything that I know so that when I pass away, they are continually escalating and pushing forward the word beyond me, beyond me. That's setting up legacy. Chango is next, but don't ever forget about that last way of business. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about it. Hey, shot. Hey, but boy, Bucheche, absolutely. I'll send my email in here. And then you guys can email me if you guys have any additional questions. All right, so then that way we don't hold up the show. Boom, there you go. La regla de ifa@gmail.com. Perfect. Yeah, good to see you out here, my brother. Okay, so now let's talk about Chango. Chango, when we talk about the Chango, we're talking about thunder of justice, courage, right? Very good to talk about Chango after Obatala for 100 million different reasons, but we're going to try to narrow this down, right? So when we talk about from the gentle coolness of Obatala, we almost have to turn to this fury red. Obatala is white, Chango with red, right? This fury passion. I call it passion because that's what Chango is. My farafun Chango in my life every day. Even though I'm a disciple of Orumila, my head is with Chango, right? So if Obatala is the aged king, right, in white, Chango is kind of that youthful king in vibrant red, right? You know how many times you maybe said in politics or anything else, you say, man, these people got the old ways, they need to change, the younger crowds, right? You probably hear this 100 different times in your communities and politics or whatever, right? And this is what that relationship looks like. About the last old one, we always say, hey, you can't keep doing things the same way. We got to change things up. And here comes Chango, that young king in vibrant red, dancing with rigor of thunder. Chango, was that historic king of oil. A lot of goodness in Chango. But Chango is deified, right, for his extraordinary power. But in the spiritual realm, because Chango, for many people, don't understand that he was a king of oil at one point. Historically, archaeologically speaking, look in the history books, Chango was the king of oil. So now When you begin to kind of see how that plays itself out, we say, okay, Onyo, he was a king of oil, but he was deified. That means Chango died as a human, elevated, and did such great work that he became an Orisha. So in the spiritual realm now, in the Orishas, he's thunder and lightning, courage, leadership, balance, justice. That's Chango, my farafun Chango. Come on, if you can't get excited about that, right? Think about it. So in a lot of our traditions, we understand that, Chango was one of the Irumoles that Olodumare sent first to this world, right? And remember, and I want to make sure I'm clear. I don't want to confuse you. There was Olodumare, and then there was Irumoles, primordial entities and energies that were flowing everywhere, the stars, the planets, everything. For anything and anything you can think of, sound, wisdom, intelligence, everything has an energy, right? That primordial energy also doubles down as Irumole Orum, right? Which is now showing us that there is another layer of primordial energies. And under there, we have this world called Aye, and that is where that energy begins to flow into Orishas, right? Particularly for our story on this world. So we got to start to kind of think about that a little bit. No, you're welcome there, Shot. So you got to think about this a little bit, right? So that means that energy that Chango deified as, right? Because you can't just deify as an Orisha. You have to attach to a certain energy when you deify, comes from a primordial energy that's whoo, 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 all the way up there, okay? So now that we got that clear, Chango's energy was one of the first of the Iramoles that Olodumare sent into this world, right? He came as a warrior, right? Very, very agile, brave, truthful, aggressive, right? Tolerant, right? Not tolerant. He was very intolerant, basically, of cowards, of lies, of theft and greed, right? That this is the essence of Chango when it's all said and done. And I tell you this, right, because I think it's important for us to understand that, right? Chango embodies the ideas of a just ruler. He doesn't like the deceit. He doesn't like the injustice. One of his praise names, one of his avatars, one of his caminos, right, is Obacoso. The king did not hang. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about that. So when I talk about that the king did not hang, right, we're hinting on how he transcended death, but also symbolizing that truth can never be hanged or killed. Right? Chango is the wielder of the double-headed axe, Oshe Chango. Right? He commands Edun Ara, the thunderstone, which a lot of times you see in Lugumi, we always put the thunder rock, you know what I mean? In his sopera, we do sacrifices with it. There's a lot of different things about that thunder rock that is very important because Chango commands it, right? So then we have to understand that. We also understand that he judges the wicked. We understand that he doesn't like Elenini. He doesn't like negativity. We ought to see, in times when we say that when lightning strikes, Chango has passed verdict on something or some matter that is wrong. When we see Chango acting in swift justice and you hear that thunder, Farafun Chango is what you should be saying. Chango loves, right? The finger things. He likes music. He likes drums. He likes dance. He likes women. He's charismatic. He's magnetic, reminding us that leadership can be both authoritative but also joyful. You got to enjoy life, right? And so Chango always teaches us at the end of the day, Elton, boy, good to see you here. Chango, at the end of the day, begins to teach us, like, hey, listen, at the end of the day, life is short. We have a destiny and we have to do it. And we got to do it with a clean heart. We got to have fun doing it. Be happy, joyful. When's the last time you smiled? Chango tells you not every job, even no matter how bad it is, something can always be worse. And Chango begins to teach us one powerful teaching right? That comes out of Ifaodu's. It shows that Chango's journey of personal transformation, right? So it said that Chango was once he was enslaved, right? He was living under, an oppressive owner, right? So basically, in this pataki, it was meant to teach us something. We're gonna get into this, into the moral of the story. So Chango went to Orumila, right, for consultation, seeking a way out of his chains. Basically, this person was just on top of him, right? And then the divination, right, revealed that Chango must perform an ebo and feed his ori. Specifically, Orumila told him to make an offering to his head, right? Specific ingredients, and then go through the town drumming and singing as if he were already free. So imagine the courage that this had to take. Someone who's a slave to somebody else, right? And now acting as his free. And if you read the storybooks, you know that this can probably get him killed. Right? So Chang'o, still a slave, was instructed to act out the celebration of freedom before it materialized, trusting completely in the prophecy. Chang'o obeyed, and he gave the prescribed sacrifice to Ori, essentially affirming his destiny, and then took his bata drums into the street, playing, with all his heart. The town erupted in curiosity and joy at the sound. Here was a slave making such confident music that people gathered as if it was a festival. When Chango's master saw the crowd dancing and his own slave at the center of it, he grew suspicious. Right? So the master assumed Chango must have stolen money from him, to fund such a celebration. So in his greed and anger, the master dragged Chango before Olofin, right? And the king, well, not Olofin, the divinity, Olofin, the king, right? And judged, right? And was judged, accusing Chango of being a thief. But Chango has stolen nothing. He had only faith in his destiny. And Olofin examined the case. And indeed, the master could not prove that Chango had robbed him. In fact, it was actually revealed that the master had buried treasure which remained untouched. Seeing the slave's innocence and baseless envy of the master, the Olofin not only freed Chango from slavery, but to repay an injustice, ordered the master of Chango's a fortune, right? And gave him basically the buried treasure. In one day, Chango went from penniless captive to wealthy free man. So the story says, right, basically here that Chango, threw a great feast because he was now rich, free, and a king. Right? So he offered friendship to his former master at that very celebration, demonstrating the royal character and the forgiveness after justice. Chango's Ori elevated him to the throne of his destiny, and he never looked back. And so then we start looking at this Pataki and we start to kind of think about Chango a little bit. We begin to see that first, we start seeing the power of destiny and self-confidence, teaching us through that Pataki that nonetheless that we have to follow in those footsteps. We have to be able to nonetheless always remember that sometimes we got to lead from the heart, right? Use intuition, follow the sacrifices, do the ebo, but that blind faith and understanding that everything's going to work out has to be pure, right? Bef- Before the world could recognize him as such, Chango had to do things. How many of us have been told to do things so that our life can be better? But because we cannot envision our own greatness, we don't do it. How many of you live in fear of what comes next? How many of you live in fear that if I go and I do this next thing and it fails, then I'm going to hit, and I'm going to fall down? And I don't want to fail, and I don't want to fall. Not knowing that some of the greatest lessons in life are those that you learn when you fail. And it's okay to fail, but it's how well you bounce back up, right? And those are the things that you always got to remember that Chango is trying to push in your life. So, Chango example challenges us. Feed your inner head, honor your Ori, step out boldly and pursue your destiny, even if the odds are against you. Second, the story kind of highlights how justice prevailed, right? The innocent are vindicated, the oppressors are humble, right? And we begin to kind of see this and we kind of see it play itself out. In other words, spirituality, right, has to yield a tangible result. But we have to have the spirituality in order to see the results. How many of you just go to a babalao, lorisha, whoever, palero, it doesn't matter, right? And you just say, here's the money, sacrifice me a goat, sacrifice me whatever, I need to get out of this jam, and you do it. But it's very transactional. Transactional and transformational are two different things. I give you something, you want me to do something, so you want me to perform a work. In order for that transactional, right, relationship to work and become transformative and harnessing the energy that you need harnessed and manipulated, you better believe, you better have some heart into there. You better understand where you're going and how you're going, and you better envision and lead your Ori to there. Have it here first. Have faith here next. Then you can pass on whatever it is needs to pass on transactionally in order for it to transform. Hopefully, you guys wrote that down. And that's the key there. All right. Now, my apologies. Let me say hi to a couple people here. Hey, Bodo Boy Bucheche. How can you explain how the Ocha ceremony works for beginners? No secrets, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Hey, stick around. I'll talk about that a little bit. All right. Love how you break these patakis. No, Alex, my pleasure. My pleasure, my friend. Okay, so now, our communion, right, with the Orishas, should likewise be a real betterment for our lives, right? In our character, in our circumstances, right? We don't just serve the Orishas in vain, right? We expect, like our ancestors expected. We want practical outcomes. We want justice. We want blessings. We want inner growth. Otherwise, what's the point? Otherwise, why do you have what you have? Why do you have your Orishas? Why do you have your warriors? Why did you receive your Orumila? Why do you have a locum that they mark for you? Why do you have Orisha Oku? Why did you go get crowned? Why are you a Babalao? Start thinking about all those things, right? Right? We have to be very practical. This is not hard. Okay. It could be somewhat confusing education wise, how to better, comprehend the academics, but this is not hard. Right? You made a spiritual investment. Use your investment. So in the context, right, Chango is this archetype, right, of a courageous leader, right, fair justice, right. So think of the struggles of justice within our society, right. I wanna kind of take a moment to kind of wrap this up a little bit with Chango, but basically we have corruption. Basically, we see discrimination. Basically, we see abuse of power. We see these things, right? Chango, Chango's thunder, when you hear a thunderstorm outside, right, reminds us, right, that we must not be silent in the face of wrongdoing. Lightning illuminates the darkness in the sky, does it not? So much truth has to expose the lies. There are storms that are raging around you, perhaps, at work, maybe at home, maybe in your community, where some, might have to speak up for what's right, right? Invoking Chango means standing for truth, even if your voice shakes and maybe you have some hesitation, right? But making sure that however way you confront Chango, for those of you who have Chango, or maybe you go to your godparents' Chango, and maybe you want to place an Adimu for Chango, And maybe you want to prepare yourself because now you understand where Chango is coming from. You're like, you know what? Let me get in front of Chango. Let me get in front of Chango. So because Chango's energy is what resides in this circumstance. That's how you interact with the Orishas. Right? So just some food for thought. It might be confronting a dishonesty. Maybe you're protecting someone that's weaker, or simply you're keeping your own integrity when it's tempted, right, to do other bad things. Tango doesn't tolerate cowardness. That's the big thing. I'm just being honest with you. You can't be too reserved. Sometimes you just got to tell people what it is. Being tactful is important, right? That's the big piece, right? He despises deception, theft, greed. Right? In our personal lives, we can translate this as, being honest in our relationships. Taking what isn't ours is wrong. Curbing our selfish impulses. Chango sets a high bar of character, especially for those in leadership. So politicians, managers, you know what I mean, Iles, godparents, we can all learn from Chango, and the leadership is a contract of honor with the people. Abuse, right? That trust and that thunderbolt may strike. So we got to be careful. Be careful. So yeah, Chango at the end of the day, right? I kind of leave you with a couple of just a lot of final notes. Chango enjoys life, teaches us to celebrate it. Don't ever forget to celebrate yours. How many people have you sacrificed in your life and you haven't spent time with? How much time are you allocating for your partner? How much time are you allocating for your children? How much time are you allocating towards your spiritual development? The things that matter, right? So his flashing lightning also spark of creativity and passion, right? Chango loves the drums and the dancing, making grand entrances, and his great colors of red and white, tells us about joy and charisma and creativity. They're divine gifts that we need to embrace. And that's also for the children of Chango. No different than when I was talking to Obatala. Look at Obatala's energy because it touches you a lot. It's a lot more powerful for those children to align with those energies of their guardian Orisha because it's prevalent, it's there, it's closer. You're closer to the action. You should be able to align to that a lot faster, and you should be a lot more proficient at it. Chango's energy is alive, each and every one of you. Just because you're not a child of Chango doesn't mean you can align with it, right? Even the boldness, right, of Chango and how confident he wears, his clothes. And I mean, Chango is phenomenal. His relationship with gender and balance, right? He's a very masculine energy. Chango is a fierce masculine figure. Chango highly valued the feminine power, right? So we can't even just say, hey, because Chango's a warrior, he's a male, masculine energy, this and that. No, no, no. But remember, Chango valued the feminine power. In fact, he took Ochung, he took Oya, he took Oba, right? Some of the greatest orishas, the feminine energy orishas, as his wives. And he relied on them for counsel. And in one pataki, Chango became the Alafin, the king. And it was his wife Oya who learned the secret of calling down the lightning. And she gave him his power, right? And it was Ochun, right, who tamed his temper with sweetness, right? This interplay, right, you begin to see it shows that the mightiest men in this world, the mightiest masculine energies in this world benefit from the wisdom of women. So, guys, be easy. So, in modern terms, one can say Chango encourages male leaders to respect and listen to those female voices, strengthen companion, actions, and intuition, right? This has to work hand in hand, nonetheless. So we honor Chango. We reflect at his sense of justice and courage. So now let's move on to the next one, right? And and again, equally. Do we need to temper power with joy and camaraderie? Yes. Tango drums calls us every day. And let's go into a tune. What do you guys think? Shit. People be hating on Chango kids. You 100% correct. I think the aspect of Chango shading the truth allows him to walk so proudly. It's hard to have pride when you're hiding with lies. All right, little boy, you guys are speaking words to my ears. Words to my ears. Good stuff. Eli as well. All right, good. I love it. I love it. Let's get into it, too. But after I get into this, I'm gonna talk about the someone asked me something here about Ocha. I'll touch on it a little bit because the respectful way of doing business is I'm not Ocha. You know what I mean? A lot of times my wife, I go to my wife when my godkids are ready to get crowned or they need more information or we need to do something specific with the Orishas that requires the touch of an Olorisha, which is a crown priest or priestess of an Orisha. And we allow those professionals to do the things that they got to do, right? But I can absolutely touch on it. All right, let's get after it. Let's get after it. Oh, June. All right, so we talked about the crackling fire and thunder and lightning of Chango, or Chango's lightning, better yet, right? The fire. And now we gotta flow into the cool, the sweet waters, right? Of Ochun. Ah, Ochun. The Orisha of fresh water, fresh river water to be exact. Ultimately at the end of the day, every person is complemented, right, with the a masculine energy and a feminine energy, right? For me particularly, I am a son of Chango, but I'm complemented with the sweetness of Ochun. That's my other half, right? And so in Lukumi, we always look for the equilibrium. So now I'm going to dedicate this time to Ochun. So what do we know about Ochun? So we know that she's a goddess of love, beauty, fertility, prosperity. If Chango is a king, Ochun is a revered queen. Nonetheless, among the Orishas, of course, right, she embodies the divine feminine archetype, right? And, she is she to the fullest divine feminine energy, right? She's sensual, yet wise, gentle, yet very powerful. Ochun's, color of the yellow, the gold, like honey, sunflowers, reflecting, sweetness, charisma. She governs all the waters that give life. So, like the river, right? That makes the land green, right? That supports the wilderness around the rivers, right? The villages and the towns that built themselves up near the river for the sake of having a close water source, right? We always got to remember that Ochum is what makes love and joy, makes life worth living, but never mistake her sweetness for weakness. Ochung is agile, Ochung is brave, just like any other male Orisha or masculine energy. Right? A fact that even the other Orishas learned this to their surprise. So there's a famous Pataki that we're gonna talk about here. A famous Pataki here. And a couple of questions. I have something to say about the Dua Buru. I know you ask all the questions you guys want. I'm gonna go through the questions after I'm done here. What about the children or male children of Ochun? IMA, what do you mean? It doesn't matter. If you are a child of a feminine energy, that's perfect. Then you will understand the complement to the masculine energy because everybody rotates with both a male and a masculine and a feminine energy. I happen to have a masculine first, right, as my head crown. But some people have feminine energies as their head crown, right? Irrelevant to the story, regardless. You know what I mean? It still reigns true. So for those of us that are children of Ochun, and I know many males that are children of Ochun, this still applies. This still applies. right? And then there's deeper understandings on why you need to have the equilibrium with a masculine and feminine energy, because maybe the life that you live required the touch of that energy, and that is why it's your crown orisha. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so now we dig into deeper, right? So there was a famous Pataki, right, that was always told that, Olodumare sent down 17 orishas from, Ikole Oru, what we call like heaven, right, and down to the earth to establish the world and humanity. And among these 17 divine emissaries, right, this party of 17, right, Ochun was the only female Orisha. Okay, the other 16 were male divinities, including the aggressive ones, right? Right, like Ogun, the intellectual one, like Orunmila, right? These male Orishas, perhaps, in their pride, at first they ignored Ochun. They didn't invite her to any council meetings that they had in order to shape the world. They attempted to do all this on their own, taking charge of all the various aspects of nature and society. But guess what? Nothing they tried was succeeding. The world remained lifeless, just parched. It was just no bueno, right? And every endeavor they took failed miserably, and humanity could not thrive. They just could not live. So finally, it dawned on them that something essential was missing, that key component. So when they consulted Ifa, the oracle itself revealed that because they have excluded the feminine energy, in essence, they excluded Ochun, their efforts were doomed. Don't pass go, don't collect $200 from my Monopoly players, right? All the Orishas turn back to Ochun, right? Ori ye ye, please help us. We need you, right? And they moved into this place of humility, right? And they began to each offer Ochun and really ask for her forgiveness. And Ochun agreed. So she unleashed her waters, the nourishing flow of rivers. Immediately, life returned to this barren wasteland that the earth had become, right? So fresh water began to revive the land. Crops grew, animals, humans started to flourish. The balance was restored. Ochun brought forth the sweet and powerful waters with them. Humanity and other species, came into existence. So the Bataki concluded unequivocally that if not for Ochun, humanity wouldn't exist. So she's the mother of life's sweetness and spiritual growth. And I can go on and on and on Ochun Patakis, because Ochun has many where she saved humanity a couple of times, where she saved some of the other Orishas a couple of times, where she's always a savior of some sort. So think about the profound truth here. Think about it, right? So the mother of life's sweetness and spiritual growth. That's who I like to consider Ochun as, right? The lone woman among the Orishas that turned out to be the critical element for success. The story is a lesson, collaboration, and respect for women contributions. All those things have to be understood. Just as the Orishas learned, our communities cannot flourish, right, if we suppress or ignore the voices of women, right? So, in a broader sense, Ifa teaches that balance, the union between masculine and feminine energies, is necessary for all endeavors. So, what are we going to do about that? Right? What are we going to do about that? How many times do you live in a household where maybe it's just no compromising, my way or the highway? Doesn't matter who it is. How many times have you been, where in a job where maybe we don't respect that equilibrium and that union, right? Male, female, maybe it's young and old. So you gotta always be careful about these. It's unity is strength, right? At the end of the day, one hand cannot lift a load, right, of the head. It's the reason why we have two hands. One has to wash the other. I could keep going on with all these idioms, right? But at the end of the day, teamwork between genders, between people of different strengths, is how big the task is going to accomplish, how well the success will be. Ochum's Pataki is the ultimate illustration. Male orishas are one hand, cannot succeed without the female orishas on the other. Right, so we got to join them together. Ochun teaches us about love, intimacy, wealth, creativity. Right, she's an orisha of fertility, not only the physical fertility for bearing children, right, but also the fertility of ideas and endeavors. Right, she nurtures the projects, right, from seed to nurture to fruition, and sees it grow. Ochun's presence is in our lives, and we can feel it every day. The creative inspiration, the flow of emotions that allows us to connect deeply with others, capacity to forgive and heal emotional wounds, right? We often call Ochun Ialolde, Yalolde. And why? Because Yalolde is the queen of all women, also known as Apeleochun, the one who uses diplomacy and gentle words to achieve her aims. While Changoro Ogun might, open a door with force, sure, Ochun will knock softly and smile at you when the door opens. And there's immense power in patience, diplomacy, and allure. Right? So, consider real world situations. Again, like I was telling you guys, is it your workplace? Is it your ile? Is it your community? Is it your family, your personal relationship, maybe with your mother? Maybe it's your personal relationship with your father. Maybe that equilibrium is not there. Ochum's story is a resounding statement that the feminine energy is indispensable in the spiritual order of things. It's not subordinate, right? But co-equal and life-giving in a world that often devalues, feminine qualities, like empathy and vulnerability and cooperation. This Orisha, particularly Ochun, those qualities are exactly what the world needs to survive, right? We find ourselves constantly in our transgressions, in all aspects of our life. This message is for everyone, any gender. We have both masculine and feminine energy within us, right? Ochung invites us to cherish that trait, right? Often we have to begin to understand that a little bit more so that we can truly understand that, and nonetheless, as strengths, not weaknesses, we have to look at compassion, intuition, and gentleness, right? For women, especially the children of Ochung, you know, asserting your worth is important, right? Ochun was not truly heard until catastrophe struck in the Pataki, right? So because she stepped in, she was not only matched the other Orisha, she saved them. So to the women listening, if you ever felt underestimated or sidelined, remember Ochun's story. Your gifts are unique and necessary. Sometimes you must insist on your space at the table because a lot depends on it. And depending on how you are communicating with the receiver of the message, you got to get artful. Maybe it's not necessarily forceful, like Chango and Ogun. Maybe it's the knock on the door, the smile, the explanation, right? For men listening, remember, what Chung reminds us that we have to value women in our lives, listen to their counsel. We got to honor their contributions. So hopefully that all makes sense. Ochung also speaks on relationships and self-love. I think a lot of times people gravitate to Ochung for the sake of, oh, I love him. or I love her. I need them in my life, and what can I do? And everybody wants to do brujeria to lock somebody down. Let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about that a little bit. What about the male children? Ache, Adita, what's going on? Okay, so let's talk about this. So, as the Orisha of love and beauty, right, Ochun teaches us that love must flow like the river. It's a giving and a receiving. Are you showing love to those that are around you? Right? If you check yes, then move on. If Ochun's water can heal a hardened heart, right? If you have been hurt and closed off, right? Because, people who get hurt sometimes like to close themselves off. Then something to think about is, have you invoked Ochung into your life? Ochung encourages you to open up again gently to let the sweetness in. Ochung doesn't want you closed away. One of her praise songs always tells us that Ochung, the river that never runs dry, right? And the praise song, or the oriki, is basically, the translation is Ochung, the river that never runs dry. I bathe in your waters and wash away sorrow. And many people, when they're depressed or they're spiritually thirsty, right, they turn to Ochun for renewal. You grab Ochun Sopera. For those of you who have Ochun, grab her water, bathe with it, right? They start suddenly, you suddenly start feeling a little bit joyous. You start, trickling back some of that energy. Why? Because she reminds us that even in activism or in serious pursuit of something, love or self-growth, we have to sometimes remember that we must not become dry and bitter. We can't let our energy get soaked up to the point where we're shriveling up. And we need that sweetness and that laughter and that art and that affection. The world without Ochung's energy becomes cruel, becomes barren and dead. Ochung says relationships, self-love, you. And that's the key. Ochun is a guardian of wealth, right? And I think before I get into this wealth thing, I want to talk about this relationship thing. Why? Because as a Babalao, I get a lot of people that want to come to me for, hey, I would love to, win this person over, or hey, I want to do this. And I always remind them, hey, Ochun is this, that, and the other. What have you done for yourself? Do you love yourself? Are you trying to force somebody to be with you that does not love you back? And are you looking at these illusions that you may see in front of you, right? And you may try to force something that doesn't need to be in your life. And you're willing to live through those transgressions for what? Well, Chung is not your you're looking at the wrong message. Do all the brujeria you want. Do all the little love jars you want. Sacrifice all the hens you want to Ochun. The point is here, you gotta love yourself before you can love others. That's gonna be the key, right? So, Ochun. Ochums and guardians, you know what I mean? And the guardian of wealth. We always mention the wealth. But with wealth as a product of fertility and hard work. Wealth is not just about all the riches like Scrooge McDuck, and in the background you see all the gold and everything else, and I'm swimming in the gold, and you know what I mean? No, 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 no. Ochum was a successful trader, a businesswoman. There's a lot of patakis that begin to portray Ochung in different ways, who became wealthy through honest trade, generosity, and bosses. She teaches that the prosperity is achieved through creativity, collaboration, and wise management, right, of resources, right? And if you're seeking some form of financial stability for success in your career, Ochung might ask, are you pursuing something you're not passionate about? Are you networking and building relationships? Because connections are important. Are you giving back or using the wealth kindly? Ochun is going to challenge you with all these questions. We see in a lot of different patakis where she works with Oya and Yemaya as the trio. and the wise management of the resources of this world. So I'm gonna move on to Ogun. I'm gonna move on, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna reserve Ogun and Yemaya for next Sunday. And then I wanna go through a journey of living with the Orishas so we can find ourselves in them. I wanna pose a couple of things here before I finish with Ochun. Okay. I want to make sure that we are all on the same page with Ochun. Let's acknowledge Ochun's role, fostering life, healing. I'm going to get to the questions in the chat as well. All right. Many of our communities, women know the power of Ochun in childbirth. She's also called the gracious mother, who soothes labor pains and grants safe delivery of that children, the force multipliers, the future. So when we start to kind of see these things, we got to start, we talk about the birth of new ideas, the start of a new chapter in life, the healing of the inner child within you. We see a lot of beautiful transformation, through Ochum's waters. Ochum can carry away old hurt and regenerate your spirits. So in summary, we ask Ochum, where's the sweetness in your life? That's what Ochum would ask you right now if she was here. Where is the sweetness in your life? Are you nourishing it? And if not, how can you invite her energy? Maybe through music, maybe through, reconciling, love that's worthy of your time, through an act of self care, maybe, or beautification to make you feel divine. By learning Ochung's lessons, we learn to love ourselves, each other. We balance strength with tenderness, right? So hopefully Ochung's, sweet waters flows through our hearts, healing, right? And that's the big key. All right. So I'll leave you this. We'll talk about the other two Orishas next Sunday because we're already at time. I didn't realize time gets away with you when you're having fun. You know what I mean? One of the biggest things that I'm always going to tell each and every one of you is that remember, learning about the Orishas is just not an intellectual exercise. It's an exotic exploration, people. Get you all hot and heavy, right? It is a mirror and a map, a mirror that shows the aspects of your life, of yourself, to the divine personalities in the map that's guiding you to become the highest version of yourself. The Orishas have shown us the blueprint, right, of spiritual evolution. Each overcomes challenges cultivated through Ache, right, contributed to the balance of this world, and likewise overcome personal challenges, cultivating our unique gifts, contributions as something meaningful to our community in this world. We got to take concrete action, right? Inspired by the Orishas. So, with that said, each morning, concentrate on your day. Allow the Orishas to flow effectively. Bow your head, and that's going to be the big key takeaway here. So we always give thanks to Olodumare, but now I want to get into the questions in the group. Hey, Alex, I appreciate you. Principle to implement. Nah, but boy, Bridget, good to see you out here. Baba, give me a pataje on Ochun, Orumila, please. All right. Let's see. Now, I want to answer the question about the Ocha. So whoever asked the question for the Ocha, please come up on horn. Let's see what you got. Let's see what you got. Let's see what you got. You said here, hi, how can you explain how Ocha ceremony works for beginners? No secrets, of course. Hey, so here it is. So I am a Z or I'm a Z. So I'm just gonna say I am. All right. So I am when it comes to the Ocha ceremonies, um to explain it in the best way possible is gonna be, and you are going to embark and possibly, I would say, probably depending on where you're going to do it, varies on how many days you're going to do this in. Typically, it's a 7-day ceremony, but because they have to do, spiritual misas and things like that within the Lukumi side. If you're doing this Ishashe African crowning, obviously they crown, right? And it's a very theirs is a very delicate process as well. I believe that they can do theirs in less than 7 days, but I am not an Isheshen or a traditional Orisha. But on the Lukumi side, the Ocha side, right? 7 day minimum. Tack on a couple of days for other things because there's a lot of egum work that needs to happen before that. This is going to be a transformational um, work that goes from solidifying your egums and the foundation of your egums to basically you being reborn again through Ochung sweet waters, right? And then depending on who your guardian Orisha is, placing you and attuning you with the energy, right, of the Irumole Orums, transmitting down through you, right? And giving you the Ache to maneuver this world with the Ache, with the power of that Orisha. That's basically the Ocha ceremony. And through that ceremony, the witnesses to that ceremony, which are all the other orishas that you are receiving as well. Because in Ocha, you're going to have a complement. Depending on your guardian orisha, dictates who needs to be witnessed there, right? You're going to see Obatala, you're going to see Elewa, you're going to see Ogun, you're going to see, you know, Chango, Yamaya, Ochun. They're all there. They're all there, right? So you're gonna see that complement and that witnesses of all those divine energies is basically what you are receiving so that you can maneuver. No different than how I was talking about the energies of Changon or Chung or Batala. Maneuvering that space is understanding that space. And you are about to enter a big responsibility and you're about to go home with all of this power. And then in Ocha, the party is not over because you received it. The party just began. And Ocha ceremony is no different than Ifa. When we bring about Allah into this world is when their training truly begins. So very different from what you go to school for today. You go to school for a 4 year university and you learn everything you have to learn. You take exams and everything else, and then boom, you take a test, and then they say, okay, you're proficient enough. So you graduate. Not in our tradition. In our tradition, we see if you're worthy enough according to your destiny to walk this step. And then once we enter you into the secrets and we put you into that inner circle, and boom, now you're a priest and a priestess. Now your training begins. So in Ocha, you have a whole year of meditation, no different than what the monks do today in the temples. It's time for silence, reflection, and you're going to get told a whole lot of taboos in between. Gotta wear white. Don't look in mirrors. Don't sit on the table. Ita. Obviously, we live in a modern day age where some of those things are gonna be necessary. So they'll do some embosses for you in order to kind of, combat some of those things. But understanding that those are the exceptions to the things that you have to ensure you just have to do for your normal day to day. Like driving a car, looking in a mirror, you have to do it, right? Because I got to look at my rear view mirror, my side mirrors. But that doesn't mean that in my house, I'm going to be looking at the mirrors 24/7. I'm going to be checking my hair out and trying to make sure that I'm right. I'm not going to be taking pictures and I'm jumping on social media. No, because how you live your Yaworaje, which is that year after you get out of the room of Ocha, will be the baseline on how you will live the rest of your life. So if you soak up, think about a battery pack, 100%. You see, every time you do something against one of those taboos, your battery level just drops. Boo, 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 boo. And when you leave that Yawarahe, depending on how much you drain that energy, that's the same energy you're gonna have for the rest of your life. That's just an analogy. There's probably not a lot of data to support that. I'm just giving you an analogy so you have a figurative understanding, right? Or and not a literal one. But hopefully I explained that for you. Hopefully I explained that for you. Okay, let's see what else we got going on. Hey, look at that. Hey, thank you very much, Sean. Sunny Shine. Hell yeah, appreciate that. Look at that. Got a contributor to the live. All right. Um, let's see. What was the next question? What was the next question? What was the next question? Somebody help me out here. Let's see. So I know we had one where somebody was asking for a pataki with Ochun and Orumila. Hey, so I don't want to not give you the pataki for Ochun and Orumila. Here's what I want you to do. Email me. I put my email in the chat, so if you scroll up, you'll see it early on. Email me. I'll send you a pataki of Ochun and Orumila. Okay, just so we don't keep people here any longer than they need to. All right, what else we got here? Who else is on here? Who else is on here? We talked about somebody asked me about Odudua. Where are we at? If you have something to say about Odudua, Buru. Yeah, IK. So the thing with Odudua, right? When we talk about Odudua, there's quite a few things that we need to understand. Um, man. So Odudua, when we have to look at the hierarchy of things, is I guess where I would start. Odudua, when we start looking at the primordial energies of Irumolez, Irumole Orun, Orisha, right? In that primordial energy, that top layer is a layer that's called Olofin, right? And Olofin is the top dog, right? The governor of basically this galaxy or this world, you can say. And under Odudua, I'm sorry, under Olofin, we sign that on this world itself, we see, Odudua, right? So when I say that, is to say that in order to understand the energies of Odudua, you got to see where he stands on the threshold of things. Odudua 100% is the closer you get away from the life and the creativity, you see that a lot of the Eguns are imparting themselves, right? And so in Odudua's essence, we see that he's a primordial force of creation, of kingship, but he has a very strong relationship with the Eguns, right? He's not simply an Orisha or, in a common sense. He's a foundational, civilizing force that's directly tied to the establishment of the world as we know it. Odudua is represents the solidification of creation. Not creation, but how do we solidify these atoms and all these little things together? He's kind of like that earthly authority, right? The foundation of kingship, of lineage, and just kind of like that brother sisterhood, right? So that's important for us to always remember. So when we start to kind of think about Odudua even further, we remember that Obatala shaped humanity and consciousness. Odudua established the land, the rules, and the political order of things. So Obatala and Odudua, we begin to kind of see that they complement each other. But that's not always the case. When it comes to Odudua, we also understand that um, there was at one point in time a strict war between Oduduwa's kids and Obatala's kids. And we begin to kind of see where the light and the dark, when they don't coincide, the world can end. And Orumila had to intervene. So Odudua, it's not about emotions and softness and persuasion a lot of times. We got to see that Odudua is also part of the land of the Eguns. So we have to also understand that. So hopefully that makes sense. Nonetheless, I'm putting my email address in here for you guys as well, so that you guys have it. Bum 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 bum. Let me put my email address in the chat. There it is. All right, but remember, the duo is awesome, man. The duo is awesome. I don't want to talk too much about the duo. A lot of secrets in the duo for sure, but a lot of things we can talk about for sure. I just don't want to delay this further. I want to make sure I'm getting to everybody's questions. It looks like I got everybody. Can we use Ochung's water even if we don't crown Ochung, or better yet, Yemaya if she's my mother? Marie, to answer your question on that, yes, everybody has to go through the river ceremony. I'll leave it at that for Ocha. Little boy, will you upload this video? Yeah, this video will be so Terrence, yeah, I don't block it. Once it goes live, you can always go back to my live tab on my channel and you can see it. I'm not one of those people that, oh, you have to get back and no. The goal of this channel is education development. That's important. So you'll see it on here. Sean had a question. I will. Sean, did I answer your question, Sean? Beautiful. Hey, appreciate you, Alex. Let's see. Okay, so there you go. Hey, what do you do when everything in life seems like it's over, like separation from the army? Need help? Oh, hey, Sean, I am here for you, brother, 100%. And I tell you this because I'm active duty, right? So I've been in the military for 26 years, right? So I want you to understand that that separation, right, or that retirement, or whatever that circumstances are, I am here to support you. It's not over, all right? It's a new beginning, okay? If you want to connect, definitely reach out to me, okay? I put my email address on there. Think about it, right? Not everybody wants to talk to anybody, and I get it. Sometimes I can be a stranger. You're just looking at your phone or your computer, and that's what it is, right? So, 100% with you, okay? So I want you to always remember that. So, so please, looking forward to hearing from you. All right. So with that said, beautiful session, Bob. I thank you for your time. Okay. I love it. I love it. I love it. I appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in. The person who needed a pataki with Ochung and Orumila, save us some time. Email me. I got you. And then hopefully I will see you soon. And Sean, I mean that. Reach out. All right. Iburu, Iboya, Ibuchete, Cyberland. It's always my pleasure. If you're about at least I hope so. Umodum, odileke.